Hey everybody, Michael Walsh here. So this video is going to be an MMA GOAT list. And if you're clicking on this, maybe you're wondering why I'm making this video. Because if you look at this channel, it's not very active, and the only videos I put on here so far have been fitness related. But I assure you, there's an important reason that I'm feeling compelled to make an MMA GOAT list at the moment. So, for starters, let me give a little background here because, MMA is near and dear to me, okay? I'm, a former amateur MMA fighter. I used to teach jiu-jitsu. I've been training in MMA for, between 10 and 15 years now. I've been following the sport a very long time. I'm not the oldest guy. I'm 33, so, I'm not the oldest, but I'm also older than some of these, guys in their 20s who are on MMA YouTube at the moment. But I've been following the sport regularly since 2004, 2005. And even before that, I remember my dad showing me the old UFCs, the UFC, 1 through 3-ish when Royce was beating everybody. I remember sitting with my dad and watching him order, I can't remember the number, but he ordered the event where Royce fought Matt Hughes and got smashed. I remember watching that as a kid. So I've been watching this sport a long fucking time, and I feel like I gotta weigh in here because I'm seeing all of the big YouTube channels at the moment, whether it's like Lucas Tracy, MMA Shea, he put out a list, Bedtime MMA, Guru, all these guys are putting, Warhorse MMA is a smaller channel I'm quite fond of. All these guys are putting out these kind of updated MMA GOAT lists. And I just gotta fucking, weigh in here because this shit is insane. So, before I complain about what these other guys are putting out, let's unpack a few things. So, I've been watching this sport long enough. I remember, when Fedor was still on top. I remember the rise of Anderson Silva, the rise of GSP. I remember when the UFC didn't have a bantamweight division or a flyweight division. I remember Dominick Cruz coming over. I remember Demetrius Johnson going down and becoming the first ever flyweight champion. And so, for a long time, as is well documented at this point, for a long time, everyone's Mount Rushmore, everyone's top 5 champions or so were the long reigning champs of old. It was, it was Jon Jones, it was GSP, it was Anderson Silva, it was Fedor, it was guys like that. And everyone agreed they were the GOATs. And at the time, what we had to distinguish between was the sort of modern era, when MMA was kind of more of a official, kind of fleshed out sport, and the prior era. So how do we distinguish between the accomplishments of someone like Fedor and someone like Dan Severn or someone like Royce Gracie, guys who fought in the earliest days, or you go back even further to the Vale Tudo days, but how do we distinguish between when MMA was barely even a sport, it was just no holds barred, limited rules fighting, to the kind of initial modern era. So now we're entering into this new phase where now we have to distinguish between those old champions and the newer champions. And this is a discussion that's been going on for a long time. Several years ago, people started noticing, hey, how come all the GOATs are retired or nearing retirement? How come we don't have any long-reigning champions anymore? We had guys like GSP with 9 defenses. How come all the great new champions only get a few defenses? And I think we know the answer. There's a few answers, but we know it's not simply that fighters back then were so much better. We know that it's instead because the pool is bigger. The sport is bigger. The UFC roster has something doubled since 2010. It takes longer to get into the UFC. And once you're in the UFC, it takes longer to climb the rankings and get a title shot. So by the time people are becoming champions, they just don't have that many years left to reign before they pass their primes. And so, yes, there's been this conversation that's been long in the making, and there's been this shift that's been long overdue, where we start giving the newer champions their credit, where we start being willing to rank people like Alexander Volkanovski alongside the greats of old like GSP. However, what we're seeing now is the pendulum swinging immediately to the other side. We're seeing all of these big YouTube channels just suddenly acting like the accomplishments of the old fighters don't mean shit. And that's fucking wrong, because it's just clear when I watch some of these videos that these guys did not watch those guys fight and don't know their resumes. You know, and that's, you just gotta do your research. The shit's all on Wikipedia, for God's sakes. Like, even if you missed most of Anderson's fights, you can look this stuff up. And I'm gonna get into the weeds here because there's stuff people clearly are unaware of that really matters to the GOAT discussion. And so, there's a couple other, I got my notes here. This is a low budget video, if you haven't noticed. I'm filming this in my garage. I'm not gonna have graphics up. I'm not gonna have images of all the fighters up. It's gonna be clear, you know, who I'm talking about at a given time. And I'm gonna put the actual list in the description of the video in case you're like trying to keep track of who was on the list already and in what order and whatnot. But bear with me here, I got my notes. So another thing that like needs to be discussed before we actually get into the list and what the criteria of the list is, like there's just certain basic misunderstandings about fighting that are kind of emerging as people are having these discussions. And one of the big ones is what a person's prime is and how it works and how long it lasts. So people are sort of settling into this very lazy idea that, like, you know, your prime goes until, you know, depending on who's talking, until you're 33, 34, 35. And people are also, they're treating that number like a one size fits all, it's true for everyone number. And on top of that, they're acting like it's just totally binary. You're either in your prime or you're completely washed, and there's no in between, there's no gradation. Now, this is just inaccurate on multiple levels. So, I've been watching the sport a long time, as I've said, and historically, what I've seen to be most common is that age 33 tends to be when you start seeing obvious declines. People tend to peak around 31, 32, and then you see obvious declines by about 33. Good examples of that are Fedor, Tony Ferguson. You know, Fedor was 33 when he got his last win of his big run against Brett Rogers, and he was 33 when he lost to Verdum. Tony Ferguson clearly peaked in the RDA fight, which I believe he was 32 in, and then after that he started doing like steadily worse against, you know, also decreasingly good competition, because he beat RDA and then he fought Kevin Lee, Anthony Pettis, and Donald Cerrone, which are just easier fights after easier fights, and he did worse every time. You know, or I mean, he arguably did worse. You know, had a harder time with Kevin Lee than he did the other guys, but his performance overall appeared worse every time. And you know, so to me it was, you know, that's also why I remember I picked Gaethje to beat him going into that fight. I'm not great at predictions, but I picked him to win because I was like, yeah, Tony is past it. I know he's on this big streak, but his best days are behind him, and Gaethje's the coming man. And so, so that's, in my experience, that's usually the number 33. We're seeing some increased longevity in recent years for certain fighters, and people have speculated that that's because training practices are better. You know, people aren't killing themselves sparring the way they used to. People are, you know, they're taking their diet and nutrition more seriously, and so on. And so I think there's some truth to that. We've also seen that longevity differs amongst weight classes. Like, famously, the heavyweight division tends to have more longevity. Just look at someone like Andrei Arlovsky compared to the lighter weight classes. And another thing is that there's different factors that go into someone's prime. So you might be in your physical prime, but not your technical prime. Your technical prime might come later. The easy example for that is Anderson Silva. His technical prime clearly happened when he was in his like mid to late 30s, and when he wasn't physically at his best anymore. You also see different types of physical diminishment. So you might, you know, still have a good chin and you might still be young, but you might be plagued with injuries. Like someone like Shogun, had all these knee injuries, had these surgeries, wasn't as athletic when he came back, wasn't as athletic during his UFC run as he was in his Pride run, even though he still had a chin, he still was young, but his knees were fucked. You can also have the opposite, where you're athletically still all there, and your technique is still all there, and you're still pretty young, but your chin is starting to go. I think Max Holloway, arguably, going into the Ilia Topuria fight, Max Holloway was arguably not quite at his very peak. I agree with people who have pointed out that in the last few years, Max, while still extremely durable, doesn't quite seem like he can take a shot as well as he used to. He doesn't seem to tank shots as well as he used to. Still incredibly durable, still insane what Ilia did. More on Ilia later. But that's just an example of how, Max is still young. He's had a lot of fights. His body appears to be intact. He still seems athletic, as you'd expect for his age. But I think his durability is starting to go a little bit. So that's going to come into play because people are looking at wins and just totally misunderstanding how primes work and are assigning all the wrong values to people's resumes because of it. So that's that discussed. All right, so now starting to get into my own list. I made it clear up front that I think while it's appropriate that we give these newer champions the chance to, hold their own against the older champions in these GOAT lists, the pendulum has swung the other way. Everyone's discrediting the old guys. And, this list I'm about to lay out is not ironclad. It's not the list. I've rearranged things on this list. I was rearranging things like all the way up till when I started this video. And, you could take any stretch. You could take any stretch of like 5 names on this list. The 15 to 20 or the 10 to 15, whatever. And you could do a little shuffling and I wouldn't complain. It's not that this list is definitive and perfect, but this list represents what I'm going to argue, broadly speaking, like a list like this should look like. And it differs quite a bit from the list people are actually putting out. And I'll say here an exception. Guru's list is pretty good. I think Guru's list is the nearest to acceptable that I've seen from people. He's the most willing to give credit to the old guy. Still not willing enough, so I still, have beef with some of his names in his order. But if I just saw his list, I wouldn't make this video. It's more to the Tracys out there and to the Bedtime MMAs and Warhorse and those kind of guys. But getting into the list itself, first I'm going to lay out my criteria. So I have a pretty, let me pull up the actual list here. So I have a pretty broad criteria. I agree that we need to look at quality of wins more than we need to look at title reigns. We can't just look at number of defenses, were you champ, weren't you champ, were you a multiple weight class champ, weren't you, stuff like that. You gotta look at the quality of wins. So that's, I don't have an order, it's not a numbered criteria list where this is the first thing, this is the second thing. Some things I value more than others, but there's several things I value, and it's not in a particular order, but that is one of the bigger things I value is quality of wins. Number of losses, and yes, the losses in your prime count for more. Obviously it's better to be undefeated through your prime than to have any losses, but if you lose really early in your career, I don't care. If you lose really late in your career, I don't care. This is another point where I disagree with Guru. He really hates on fighters for having big loss streaks at the end of their careers. And it's I don't count that for much. If you're clearly way past your prime, if you're washed and you're just losing and losing and losing, so what? What? That says nothing about how great a fighter you were. And that just would happen to anybody if they fought long enough. If Khabib never stopped fighting, eventually he would be on a 10-fight losing streak. It's just a matter of when. And so you look at someone like Tony Ferguson, right, where he had his big streak, never got a title shot, and then boom, fell off, had 7 losses in a row or something. To me, that just isn't any different than if he had that streak, lost to Gaethje, lost to Oliveira, and then retired. It would be the same story. It'd be, he had this great run. This is where he fell off. This is who he lost to. You know, when he was declining but still good, he lost to these good guys. You know, he lost to, you know, Gaethje and Oliveira. And we can predict it would have just gotten worse from there. You know, that's that reality. And now we live in this other reality where it just kept getting worse from there. You know, and to me, those are just effectively the same thing. Yeah, it looks bad. Yeah, it like leaves a bad taste in your mouth. And yeah, people benefit from the opposite. Someone like Khabib benefited from retiring when he did, and now he has this aura of being undefeated. We imagine that he could have done more. Like, I've heard the comparison made to Nirvana, where Kurt Cobain died young. They'd had, what, like the 3 albums or something, and everyone liked them. And so, since we never got to see what more albums they would have made, we don't know if Nirvana would have fallen off like other bands, like Pearl Jam or something. And so you kind of, if you quit early, people give you the benefit of the doubt that way. And I get that, and that plays a factor. Like, if Fedor just retired after the Brett Rogers win and never went on the losing streak, people would hold him higher in the GOAT discussion. But we know, nope, this is exactly how far you could have went. Whereas if you retire on top, we always wonder, like, how much further could he have gone? And I get that. But circling back, you know, if you have losses way past your prime, you know, guys like Ferguson, BJ Penn, these sorts of characters, like, I'm not going to hold that against you. You know, I'm going to look mostly at who'd you lose to in your prime, when did that prime end, you know, what could you get done before you were no longer on top. That's more of what matters. So, I am still considering title wins. Like, people are saying we just don't count title wins anymore, and that's mistaken. You shouldn't only count title wins. You shouldn't only consider long reigning champions like eligible to be on a GOAT list. However, there are still things that make title wins important. So if you're a long reigning champion, if you're Anderson Silva, if you're GSP, if you're Mighty Mouse, you have a target on your back. Everyone is trying to beat you. Like, every top coach in the world, all of the top people in your division, everyone is looking at you. Everyone's studying your wins. Everyone's looking at how the last guy tried to adapt to beat you, how you adapted to beat him. Everyone's, like, trying to solve you. You know, you're the electric fence and everyone else is the raptor, you know, poking and prodding, trying to find the weak points. And that makes it difficult. Every fight you're in is 5 rounds. That means every training camp is a 5-round training camp. And yeah, that can also be an advantage. So, like, people pointed out that, like, Demetrius Johnson, since flyweights never got main event spots back then, that meant he had all his 5-round experience and his opponents didn't, for the most part. Some of them were champions in other leagues before they joined the UFC. But for the most part, they weren't getting 5-round experience before they fought him. So yeah, there it could be an advantage. But generally speaking, you know, you are the one with the target on the back. You're the one with the hard strength of schedule. You always have to fight the next top guy in a 5-round fight. And on top of that, there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of mental pressure. All eyes are on you. And we hear about that from guys like GSP and other champions, where they almost feel like a weight lifted when they retire or when they lose. Because finally that pressure's off. And so, and lastly, when you fight someone, if you're the champion, if you fight the #1 contender, you're probably fighting the best version of that person. You're fighting the most motivated, the most prepared, the most, you know, because the chips are down. Like, this is make or break. This is their shot at glory. This is their shot at the belt. They're going to bring their all more often than not. So beating someone, you know, beating Chris Carriazo for the belt means more than just beating him in some fight. You know, so that does weigh in the favor of the old champions. That does weigh in the favor of the people with more title wins. It's not all that we're going to look at, but we are going to look at it. All right, next, longevity. So this is, you know, having good wins late into life, into old age. You know, and that can be a long career, and that can just be you start late. But either way, you know, if you are coming back, if you are continuing to get ranked wins way late in your fighting life, that's going to count for you, you know, versus someone who falls off. You know, Tony Ferguson, again, the easy example. Spoiler alert, Tony Ferguson is not in this list. This is going to be a top 20 list. not top 30, not top 50, but top 20. Tony Ferguson is not on it. But he's a good example where it's like he fell off and then didn't have any more success, because his career would be looked at differently if he lost to Gaethje, lost to Oliveira, but then beat, you know, someone ranked number 10 or something, and then beat another guy who was ranked number 9, and then lost to another top 5 guy, but then beat one more top 15 guy. You know, if that kind of stuff happened, we would look more fondly and more favorably on Tony's run. Instead, it was just he fell off and then he fell off. We're also going to look at cross-divisional success. So if you're having success in multiple weight classes, that goes well for you. It doesn't have to mean you're a champion in multiple classes, though you'll see from the examples that several people were. But, you know, cross-divisional success is impressive. We're also going to look at dominance. So, you know, how decisively are you beating people? How one-sided is it? Does it seem hopeless for your opponents? You know, and especially if those opponents are of extremely good quality. So that's a factor. We're also going to look at the variety of stylistic matchups. So not just matchups that are bad again, or that would be bad for you, that would be stylistically challenging matchups for you, but just, did you fight a variety of people? Did you fight strikers, wrestlers, jiu-jitsu guys, all-rounders, you know, knockout guys, people who could push a pace? Like, how much variety of opponents did you have to take on? We're also going to look at innovation on the sport meta. So, you know, this is something people never mention, but I think it counts for something. It's, did you change the sport? You know, did you introduce techniques or approaches that were so innovative that they actually affected the whole meta going forward? And some of the fighters on this list most certainly did that. And then lastly, we're going to do the eye test. And so this is sort of like the pound for pound consideration in the classical sense, which is if they were all the same size, who would win? But basically, when I look at you, just how obviously good are you? You know, and when I look at you beat the people you beat, how obviously good are you? And so this is the most kind of vague, but we will be talking about it. And so naturally, you'll probably be wondering, like, oh, is Jon Jones eligible? Are you counting steroid cheats, you know, or not? And like, how does that work? So I have a list of, the way I'm going to treat that is I have asterisks. So I have things that count against you on your resume but don't disqualify you. So I will be counting guys who pop for steroids. Jon Jones will be on this list. I don't like it any more than you. I don't like the guy, but he's on the list. But being popped for steroids will count against you. Other things that will count against you are really close wins. So I'm going to just treat the records as official. I'm counting wins as wins. I'm counting losses as losses. But I will acknowledge if they're close in both directions. If you have a close loss, we'll talk about it. If you have a close win, we're going to talk about that too. Also, another thing is if you cheat a lot, which kind of connects to the steroids, but if you cheat a lot in the cage, that's also going to count against you. And then another thing, and this is something people overlook, I think, were you obviously, like, say you were the champion, were you obviously the best in the world in your division at that time? And that can mean you have some rival that you were trading wins with or that came around later and beat you, but it can also mean that you were of an era where there were multiple organizations that had comparably good divisions. So if you're the middleweight champ in one organization, but another organization has a great middleweight division, that's going to count less in your favor than if you're in the modern era where like everyone, where the UFC is, you know, effectively a monopoly, and where like all the great middleweights are just in the UFC. And that will, you know, as you probably guess, that's going to count more against the old fighters than the new ones. But that's how we're going to do things. So one thing I'm going to mention before I get into the list itself, Ilia Topuria is not being considered. He's done great things, but he is just not being considered. It's too early. We need to see what happens. He's just not eligible. I suspect when all is said and done, he will not only be on this list, but he will be high on this list. But at the moment, I'm not considering him. And some people might object to that because I see people are already putting him in like their top 5 and shit like that, which is nuts. And I'll explain why. But we just need to see what happens, because again, I've been watching this sport for a while, and we've seen shit like this come around. Not at this level exactly, but we've seen, you know, not just with Conor McGregor, because when Conor McGregor beat Eddie Alvarez, everyone was high on him. But we've seen guys appear and accomplish things very quickly, and if you were going to make a GOAT list and you were going to include them, like, they might have made the list, even though that would have aged like milk. So, for example, Cody Garbrandt. Cody Garbrandt beat Dominick Cruz. He was, I believe, 10-0 with that win. And he put on an absolute masterclass. I know some people are trying to retcon that and act like Cruz was just there to lose. And yeah, Cruz was a little past it, but watch the BJJ Scout video on that fight. And you will see that Cody Garbrandt came in with a master game plan. He and his camp had figured out every aspect of Dominick Cruz's footwork patterns, and they had counters and plans for all of it. During the fight, Cody Garbrandt literally like points out, like, I knew you were going to do that. Ooh, I knew you were going to step like this. Like, he is rubbing it in Cruz's face as the fight goes on. You know, that was a masterclass. You know, why Garbrandt didn't, you know, put similarly good prep into his subsequent fights, you know, that's for him to answer. But that was a masterclass fight. Cruz was highly regarded at the time, as he should have been. And if we made a GOAT list at that time, at the time of that win, Garbrandt might have been on it. And then, like, look how stupid that would be in hindsight. Brock Lesnar. There was a point when Brock Lesnar was 5-1. He had beaten Heath Herring, Randy Couture, Frank Mir, Shane Carwin. He was the heavyweight champion with multiple defenses in only 6 fights. You know, that puts Pereira's run to the title to shame. You know, if we would have made a GOAT list while he was on top, he might have been on it. In hindsight, that'd be kind of silly. Sokaju, a fighter probably most of you have never heard of. He was a judo champion who came to MMA, and I believe, I'm going from memory, but I believe in his like 3rd or 4th fight, he fought Little Nog, and then he fought Arona, and he knocked them both out in about a minute. So he was like 4-1 with not like sub 1 minute knockouts of Arona and Little Nog, and he appeared to be the coming man. If we just made a GOAT list right then and there, some people might be like, hey, is this guy top 30? Well, maybe top 50, you know, who knows? But then he came to the UFC, he immediately lost to Machida, and then it was just all downhill from there. Now he has this like lame 50-50 record, and no one cares about him. So with Ilya, I don't think that will happen, but there's a chance. Like, what if Ilya loses to Armin or Paddy in his next fight? What if he loses to both of them? Or what if he loses to Islam and then loses to one of them? You know, like something like that. You know, he loses at lightweight. Let's say that happens, and then he goes back down to 145. What if he does that and John Silva's the champion and Silva knocks him out? Now he's coming off 2 or 3 losses in both weight classes. All of a sudden, no one's considering him for top 30. You know, like, we just need to wait and see. And also, and this kind of gets into the discussion of people's primes, everyone is overrating what Ilya is doing right now. Like, don't get me wrong, what he's doing is insane, but Volkanovski is past his prime. Charles Oliveira is past his prime. Max Holloway is arguably slightly past his prime. So, like, these wins on paper look amazing. And in reality, they are amazing, because even if they're past their prime, Max and Volk are still clearly the top 1 and 2 featherweights, and Oliveira is clearly a top 3 lightweight. So to knock out the number 1 and 2 featherweight and the number 3 lightweight back to back to back, all in title fights, is just absolutely nuts. So what Topuria is doing, whilst being undefeated, whilst being only 28 years old, is absolutely fucking phenomenal. You know, Ilya is arguably pound for pound number 1. It's either him or Islam, but whether he's 1 or 2, it's irrelevant. And I expect great things from him, but he just hasn't done what people are acting like he's done. Because it looks like he's beaten like 3 of the top 20 fighters to ever live, you know, all in a row. And on paper he has, but in reality he hasn't, okay? He's just beaten the 1 and 2 featherweight and the 3 lightweight. That's a much more accurate way to describe what's happening, which is still crazy, but it's not what people are acting like. And again, this goes back to how people look at primes. They're like, oh, are you still good? Then you must be in your prime. You know, when in reality, That's not how primes work. Sometimes people fall off a cliff. Often they start declining. And there's plateaus and valleys. Maybe they're here, ooh, a decline, and they kind of level out. Ooh, a bigger decline, they level out. But, you know, Volk and Oliveira are not in their prime. Okay, I heard Lucas Tracy argue like, oh, but he, and other people are like, oh, but he arguably beat Arman. He must be in his prime. Charles Oliveira, in the Arman fight, was a 34-year-old lightweight, which by itself says volumes. He'd had over 40 fights, and he'd been knocked out 4 times. And he'd been dropped in several other fights. Okay, that is not a guy, the fucking guy trains at shoot-a-box. He's not in his prime. Like, he wasn't in his prime in the Arman fight, okay? He's still good. It's still a good win for Topuria. It was still a very good win for Arman. That was not prime Oliveira, okay? Like, it just wasn't. All right, moving on. So now we can finally, a fucking half hour into this video, we can finally get into the actual list. So first I'm going to do honorable mentions. Again, it's a top 20 list. And there's people that could have made the list. There's people that I considered putting on the list, but who just didn't make the cut. Especially for the top 20 spot. It was actually that spot alone. I was like pretty comfortable with like 1 through 19, and then number 20 was where I was like, I feel like a lot of these guys could be here. But I'm going to give some honorable mentions, and I wouldn't hate it if these guys were in your top 15, maybe even top 10, because again, this is shuffleable. This isn't the definitive list that has to be in this order, but these are the honorable mentions who did not make the cut. We've got Henry Cejudo. We've got Alex Pereira. We've got Charles Oliveira. You know, hate to break it to you, Charles Oliveira did not make the list. We've got Israel Adesanya, did not make the list. We've got Alexandre Pantoja, did not make. I'm sorry, Warhorse, he did not make the list. I absolutely love Pantoja. He's one of my favorite fighters at the moment. I just want to watch that guy win and win and win forever. But he's not on the list. Aljamain Sterling, not on the list. So those are some honorable mentions that were looked at but did not make the cut. So now, at last, with all of that said, all that preamble, let's fucking get into the list. So number 20, I have BJ Penn. Now, BJ Penn is sitting bad in everyone's memory right now because he ended on that horrible losing streak. He's got all of this crazy fucking shit going on in his personal life right now. We've seen videos of him getting knocked out in, you know, the parking lots of bars and, you know, in street fights. You know, everyone has a bad impression of him at the moment. But we need to look back at what this guy did, okay? 2-division champ in the UFC, lightweight and welterweight. Now, where this matters is because he was clearly the best in those divisions at a point. So, you know, like I said, it matters in the past if there were other divisions in other organizations with other top fighters that you maybe didn't cross paths with. It doesn't matter for BJ Penn. At lightweight, not only did he beat the guys in the UFC, he beat Sean Shirk, he beat Diego Sanchez, all those kinds of guys. He beat Takanori Gomi. He submitted Takanori Gomi, who was the Pride champ. He was the lightweight outside the UFC, you know, knocked out Jens Pulver. You know, Takanori Gomi was the man. And BJ Penn beat him. Okay? And Penn avenged his, like, one lightweight loss against Pulver and finished him. So Penn was just clearly the best lightweight in the world. And then at welterweight, he beat Matt Hughes. And Matt Hughes was the consensus welterweight, like top welterweight at the time. Insane record. He'd beaten Sakurai, who was the other, you know, welterweight people were looking at. Hughes beat him. And, you know, and everyone considers Hughes to be like the consensus number 3 welterweight of all time behind GSP and Kamaru. People were foolishly considering Tyron Woodley to perhaps be better than Hughes. In hindsight, you know, Hughes should be number 3, Woodley should be number 4. But, you know, but BJ Penn beat him. And then, yeah, he lost him again, but they beat him in the third fight. So he clearly established himself to be like the top lightweight and at a point the top welterweight. And he beat very good names to do so. And his only losses during his prime were against Pulver, who he avenged, Hughes, who he avenged, GSP twice, and I mean, losing to prime GSP up a weight class, one of them by split decision, not holding it against him, like not at all. And then he also lost, I don't know if it was at middleweight or light heavyweight, but he lost a decision to Lyoto Machida. Lightweight BJ Penn fought Lyoto Machida and lost a decision, okay? I'm not holding that against him. You know, call me crazy. And then he didn't lose until he was 32 against Frankie Edgar. First fight, very close, very controversial. Second fight, not so much. So that's Penn's prime. And that is absolutely worthy of being top 20. You know, Penn is a guy who really gets overlooked in the history books. You know, especially these days, people are totally overlooking. You know, in the era where people are overlooking Anderson Silva, of course they're overlooking BJ Penn. But he deserved to be there. I thought he, you know, again, I was on the fence about whether he should be there, whether Cejudo should be there, whether Sterling should be there, whether Alex Pereira should be there. But I think I went through with the right choice. BJ Penn did some crazy things, okay? So, moving on. Number 19, and this is going to ruffle some feathers too. Deiveson Figueiredo. Okay. You know, people might be mad Pantoja's not on this list. The reason he's not on is because of Deiveson Figueiredo. Deiveson Figueiredo is one of the most underrated modern fighters, period. The reason he's on this list is because he, in his prime, was clearly the best flyweight. Because, look at this. In his prime, he only lost once, and it was to Formiga, who no one considers better than him. I think everyone would pick him in a rematch, pick Figueiredo. You know, that's sort of like Miocic having an unavenged loss against Stefan Struve, like no one cares. And that's it. Figueiredo has an underrated title reign because he had the weight miss against Benavidez, so that didn't count. You know, it was similar, but, you know, less unfair to like when Oliveira missed weight against Gaethje. And he has that draw against Moreno, which most people thought he won, so that like should have been a defense, but now it's actually a retention. But if that were different, if that were a win, if he'd made, you know, if he hadn't missed weight by like 2 pounds or 1.5 pounds, whatever it was in the first Benavidez fight, he would have had 3 defenses at flyweight, because he would have had, actually it would have been 3. It would have been the rematch with Benavidez, it would have been Perez, and it would have been Moreno. And then he lost Moreno, won it back. Past prime, won it back. You know, clearly proved himself the better man of the two of them, better than Moreno. Lost in that 4th fight because he was past his prime. I forget what age he was, but he was like 35 or something in that 4th fight. And then he goes up to bantamweight, and he puts together 3 ranked wins. He beats, I forget the exact order, but he beats Rob Font, he beats Chito Vera, and he beats Pedro Munoz, I think it was. And that's insane. Like, that kind of longevity and at multiple weight classes to like be nearing a title shot before he finally lost, it's absolutely insane. Like, that's such a good resume. And the reason he's on here, and the reason someone like Pantoja's not on here, is because he beat Pantoja. And it wasn't a green Pantoja, it was during, you know, Pantoja had like 30 fights or something by the time he fought Figueiredo. So what Figueiredo showed to me is that compared to Moreno, compared to Pantoja, he was the best flyweight. What it showed me is that if prime Figueiredo is around, Moreno ain't champion and Pantoja ain't champion. Pair that with the wins, pair that with, you know, how long he went with that one loss, pair that with the success he had into older age and a lighter weight class up at bantamweight, you know, 2 divisional success, nearly got a 2nd title shot up a weight class, won the belt back off Moreno in that trilogy. Like, this guy belongs here. He's incredibly underrated. Some of the nerds underrate him because he's so athletic and he doesn't, you know, they only like guys that feint and jab, you know, but Figueiredo belongs here. So that's number 19. Number 18 is Randy Couture. Okay, Randy Couture is a 3-time heavyweight champion, and he is a 2-time light heavyweight champion. And he did it all when he was old. Okay, Randy Couture was 44 when he won back the heavyweight title and defended it. He won it off Tim Sylvia, and he defended it against Gabriel Gonzaga, who everyone picked against him because Gonzaga had just come off that head kick knockout against Krokop. 44 years old, mauls Gonzaga, finishes him. He was 46 when he beat Brandon Vera, which was a ranked win at the time. So the longevity is insane. The list of wins is insane. I'm going to list, kind of his relevant names here because a lot of people don't remember. But he beat Sylvia, he beat Gonzaga, he beat Vera, like I said. He beat Liddell, he beat Ortiz, he beat Belfort, he beat Randleman, he beat Pedro Hizzo twice. These are former champions, okay? Across 2 weight classes, all at old age. Now, what's counted against him is not just that there were a lot of losses, but he was never like the best in the world at a given weight class. Because Liddell proved he was the better light heavyweight. There were the guys in Pride that, seemed like they were better light heavyweights than Liddell. At heavyweight, Fedor was around the whole time, Couture, a great champion, great fighter, but was never really the best. It's that he had such longevity and did it into such late age and fought everybody. Fought a who's who at least, not everybody, because like I just said, he didn't fight everybody. But that he fought a who's who, that's why he's so high on this list. And this is a good time to mention something I should have mentioned at the start of this video. But another thing that the old guys need to get credit for, and this cuts both ways, but because people will look at how many losses some of these old guys have. Bear in mind, these old guys fought way more. These old guys fought in tournaments. These old guys fought more on short notice. These old guys fought in an era where this shit wasn't all on the internet and where this was like an early sport where you would go to Japan and fight someone and not know who the fuck the guy was and not know anything about him. This is gonna, they fought across weight classes more often. This is gonna lead to more checkered records with more fights, but also more losses. And so that cuts both ways. I'm not gonna hold it against Kamaru Usman that he didn't fight like that, but I'm also not gonna look at the number of losses on someone like Randy Couture's record and be like, oh, how is this guy a GOAT? He lost 8 times or something. That's bullshit. So bear that in mind, people. But moving on. That's Couture. Couture is number 18. Number 17 is TJ Dillashaw. Again, he's on the list. I know he popped for EPO, but he's on the list. That's an asterisk against him. But this guy, a very underrated champion. Very underrated champion. What he did to Barao in back-to-back fights, insane. And now, people are going to act like that win isn't good because Barao fell off. I'm pretty sure he fell off because of what TJ did to him. Okay? Those were life-altering beatings. Those were ego-destroying beatings. Barao was being considered for top pound-for-pound fighter in the world at the time. He had multiple defenses at bantamweight. He was finishing people. He finished Eddie Wineland with a spinning back kick to the face. He was the man. And, I think he was never the same after those losses. And we've seen that. Paulo Costa was never the same after what Israel Adesanya did to him. Right? We all agree on that. We all get that. But then we're going to look at someone like Renan Barao and be like, oh, this isn't... Those 2 title fights don't count as great wins because he didn't do much after that. Horseshit. So, he's got those 2 wins. He's got the wins over... he's got the win over Sun Sao. He's got the win over... John Lineker. He's got the wins over Cody Garbrandt, which, again, I know Garbrandt never quite did what he did against Cruz again, but those are still great wins, 2 good knockouts. He's got the win over Sandhagen, which, incredibly close, very controversial, but the loss to Cruz was very close and controversial. I'm just counting the official record. It's an asterisk against him that Sandhagen fight was so controversial, but it cuts both ways. That applies to the loss as well. And if you look at his record, if you look at who he lost to, He lost. He got flash knocked out in his like 5th fight against Dodson. Lost a split decision to a sunset, which he avenged. Lost a very controversial fight to Dominick Cruz. Went down in weight, clearly depleted, got flash knocked down by Cejudo. Beat Sandhagen, and then fought Sterling with a missing arm, which doesn't fucking count in my book. It's technically a loss, but that's the most egregious. Like, we all agree that fight just shouldn't have been sanctioned. Like, that was they got over on us by letting that fight happen. So, really, this guy's resume is pretty fucking immaculate as far as I'm concerned. And as far as that eye test I was talking about, look how good this guy was. Just look at him fight. Look at the grappling, look at the takedowns, look at the striking. The guy was a savant, okay? Hard as nails, determined as hell. Endless cardio, and I know EPO, yeah, but endless cardio. The guy was one of the best fighters to ever live, okay? Like, straight up. He belongs where I put him. Number 16, Daniel Cormier. So, Cormier is kind of in that Randy Couture vein. He is a double champ, light heavyweight and heavyweight. Did it in older age, not as old as Cormier or as Couture, but quite old, which means a little less in the heavier divisions, but still means something. And he just has a great resume. His only losses are to the greatest light heavyweight of all time, Jon Jones, and one of the greatest heavyweights of all time, Stipe Miocic. He beat Miocic the first time. He was pretty fucking old in the other 2 fights. He's got great wins. I remember him on the come up. I remember when he upset Bigfoot Silva, knocked him out. People were counting him out. I remember when he beat Barnett, was insane. He beat Nelson, Mir. He beat, the Henderson win isn't a great win, let's be real. But he beat Dan Henderson. Beat Gustafsson, beat Rumble twice, beat Derek Lewis, he beat Uzdemir, beat Stipe once. Like, this is an insane resume. What's holding him back is, it's not the best divisions. Some of the wins are controversial, like the Gustafsson fight, very controversial. Arguably closer than the Gustafsson-Jones fight. And he just was never quite the best because Stipe got the better of him. Kane was champion when Cormier was on the come up. And just Jones always had his number at light heavyweight. I know the second loss was overruled because Jones popped, but he still beat him the first time. And just nothing has made me think he would ever beat Jones. So, and granted, those are good guys to have lost to. And that's why Cormier is, on this list. He deserves to be here. But I just think, some people will have him higher. Like, some people have him, top 6, top 5, which I can see the argument. He's an insanely great fighter. But I just think there's other people on this list with better resumes against better competition. So that's where he's at. So number 15, very underrated fighter, Frankie Edgar. So some people are going to be rolling their eyes. How is Frankie Edgar ahead of DC? Let me tell you. So Frankie Edgar, lightweight champion, dethroned BJ Penn, decisively beat him in the rematch, had the trilogy with Gray Maynard. The second Maynard fight is a draw, so it's counted as a retention. And I don't know how they count that as far as the records of defenses, because for a while, up until Islam, the UFC record for title defenses at lightweight was 3. And it was held by, like, Khabib and Benson Henderson. And I think Edgar is counted in that company because, he had those 3, because he had the Penn rematch and then the 2 Maynard fights. Since the one was a draw, I think he still is counted because he, it's a retention instead of a defense, but I think it still counts towards the record, but I'm not 100% sure. But in any case, as a lightweight champion, he's at least in the conversation with guys like Henderson, guys like Khabib, as far as his title reign. He loses to Benson Henderson. Very close fight. He arguably wins the rematch. He loses, split decision, but arguably wins. And bear in mind, Benson Henderson is huge. Benson Henderson has fought at welterweight. He's a big lightweight. Frankie Edgar ended up at bantamweight. okay? So to arguably beat him in the rematch and have such a close first fight as well, fucking nuts. And that's after that great reign, that like elite company reign of 3 defenses or 2 defenses and a retention against good fighters, overcoming your 1 loss against Maynard, you know. Then, so that's at lightweight. Then he goes down to featherweight. He gets a title shot against Aldo, close fight, loses. Goes on this insane streak. He beats Charles Oliveira. He beats Cub Swanson, finishes Cub Swanson, knocks out Chad Mendes, earns another shot against Aldo. You know, close fight, but clearly loses. A decision, fair enough. Has more success. He beats Jeremy Stevens. He finishes Yair Rodriguez. You know, and then he starts to decline. You know, yeah, he loses to Ortega. You know, he beats Swanson again. He loses to Holloway. Loses to Zombie. But he ultimately goes down to bantamweight. And in a main event, very close fight, controversial win, but he gets a top 10 win at bantamweight over Pedro Munoz. So that's elite company title reign at lightweight. Arguably wins it back against Henderson, but doesn't. Legit top contender at featherweight with wins over Oliveira, wins over Rodriguez, wins over Swanson, wins over Chad Mendes, wins over Stevens. Like, you know, close fights with Aldo. Like, legit top contender at featherweight. Goes down to a 3rd weight class, late in his career, bantamweight, you know, arguably best division in the whole sport, gets a top 10 win. I mean, underrated. One of the hardest dudes in the sport, totally underrated, belongs where he is. Top 15. Moving on. Speaking of 3 divisional success, Dan Henderson. Now, the lack of respect that Dan Henderson gets in the modern age, like, fucking disgusting. Like, Dan Henderson, like Couture, like Cormier, very successful into old age. On top of that, he was he might be the first simultaneous 2-division champion in a major organization, because he was the Pride middleweight and light heavyweight champion simultaneously. They called it welterweight and middleweight, but it was middleweight and light heavyweight in Pride. He was that. He was the Strikeforce light heavyweight champion, and he had wins at heavyweight. And not just wins. He beat Fedor. He beat Nogueira. He beat even Gilbert Yvel is a great win at heavyweight. You know, Gilbert Yvel beat. You know, he knocked out Czech Congo. He knocked out Semi Schilt. Like, he was one of the wins that Junior Dos Santos got on his like run up to the title. Dan Henderson beat that guy. He's a fucking middleweight. Like, this is insane stuff. And if you just look at his wins, I made a list because there's a lot of them. Like, he beat Carlos Newton. You know, UFC welterweight champion. He beat Nogueira, he beat Fedor, he beat Yvel. He beat Fei Zhao for the belt. Fei Zhao just knocked out King Mo to get the belt after King Mo beat Gegard Mousasi, which people have heard of. He knocked out he was the first. Fei Zhao gave Yoel Romero his first loss. Yoel Romero was like 4-0, 5-0. You know, pretty young by Romero standards. Like, he came out in his like 2nd MMA fight, Romero did, and just standing in front of a guy, just reached down and ankle picked him and like flipped him upside down like he was pulling the rug out from under him in a cartoon. Like, Romero was looking like Romero, and Fei Zhao TKO'd him, gave him his first loss. And old man Henderson, like a 37, 38-year-old Dan Henderson, came and knocked that dude the fuck out at light heavyweight, not even middleweight. So, he beat him. He beat Wanderlei Silva. He dethroned Wanderlei Silva, knocked him out with a left hook, took his belt in Pride. He beat Vitor Belfort. He lost to TRT Vitor later on, but he beat him when they fought in Pride. He beat Shogun twice, knocked out Michael Bisping, almost beat him in the rematch, honestly. When he was 44 years old, he knocked out Tim Bosch, who was ranked 13 at the time, at middleweight. Insane. He beat Babalu twice. He beat Rich Franklin. He beat Paul Juarez. Like, he was, look at how much credit we've given to Kamaru Usman for beating Buckley as a 38-year-old. When Dan Henderson was 38, he beat Fedor and Shogun back-to-back. Okay, like, this is insane stuff. Insane stuff. And yeah, he's got a lot of losses. Yes, he has a lot of dicey decisions. I don't know what it is about the last name Henderson, but like him and Benson Henderson have the most controversial split decisions on anyone's record. But nevertheless, the shit Dan Henderson has done is just, it's beyond compare in a lot of ways. I mean, that sort of 3-divisional success over those kinds of names with that strength of schedule in these many different divisions, or in different organizations, like at his age, like it's crazy. Like another thing that counts against him is it's arguable if he was ever the best in a given weight class, because his best argument would be when he was the Pride champion. Or the simultaneous Pride champions. Because at that point, Rich Franklin was the middleweight champ in the UFC, and Henderson beat him. Liddell was the light heavyweight champ. Liddell lost to Rampage. Rampage lost to Vanderlei. Vanderlei lost to Henderson. Maybe Henderson was better than Liddell. We never got to see that fight. He did go on to lose to Rampage. Henderson did, to unify those belts. But, and he also lost to Anderson Silva, who was kind of on the come up at the time, because Anderson dethroned Rich Franklin, then fought Henderson. Henderson then fought Franklin and beat him. But, so you could say, like, well, Rampage and Anderson were around, so Henderson was just never the best light heavyweight or middleweight. However, you never know, because given his age, like, even just having a couple years between those fights, like between winning the Pride middleweight belt, winning the Pride light heavyweight belt, and then fighting those guys, who knows if he declined enough in those times. Like, maybe if he fought Rampage the same night he fought Vanderlei, maybe he would have won. It's maybe. Not willing to bet the house on it, but you never know. So, that's Dan Henderson. He is, where did I have him? Number 14? Number 14, and he fucking belongs there. Okay, moving on. At number 13, I have Kamaru Usman. Okay, this will be less controversial. I think people are, for the most part, giving him the respect he deserves. But even there, people are underselling his title reign. Yes, okay, he beat Covington twice. Yes, he beat Masvidal twice. It's kind of like when Kane fought, like, between like 5 fights, he had just fought JDS and Bigfoot Silva over and over again. But people are underselling, particularly the Covington wins, because I get it. No one likes Covington. I don't fucking like Covington. And yes, Covington hasn't had a lot of success since losing to Usman twice. And yes, Covington was never a champion. But if you're going to look at Covington, and you're going to look at the Covington that fought Usman both times, and pretend that's not one of the best welterweights you've ever seen, you're fucking crazy. Okay? The wrestling, the pace, the durability, the doggedness. Like, I get it, his striking is sloppy, he does a lot of arm punches, not the biggest guy in the weight class, not a great submission threat, but if you don't watch that guy and recognize that he would give problems to every welterweight to ever fucking live, you're nuts, okay? You're just nuts. Like, go back, rewatch those 2 Usman fights. Like, it's insane. And Usman had, he's one of these, he's the perfect illustration of the new champs versus the old champs, because he had this long win streak. He was like I think it was a 9-fight win streak in the UFC before he got a title shot. Then he beats Woodley, who went on to lose, but nevertheless is one of the best welterweights to ever live. Beats him, beats Covington twice, beats Burns, who, again, people are trying to pretend isn't a great win, as if Burns wasn't on a streak at welterweight, as if he didn't have great wins, as if he didn't beat Woodley himself, didn't knock out Damian Maia, didn't go on to have good fights after, as if he didn't go neck and neck with Khamzat Chimaev after that, so to come out, knock him out within 2 rounds, pretty fucking nuts. And then he doesn't lose until after his prime. He doesn't lose until he's like 35. I'm pretty sure he was 35 when he lost to Edwards in the rematch and then in the 3rd fight. And he was clearly winning, decisively winning that 2nd fight until the knockout. So, as far as I'm concerned, he just went his whole fucking prime and didn't lose. He's got 1 loss really early in his career, when in his like 2nd fight or something. It's like Volkanovski's loss. But in his actual prime, during his actual good years, the man was undefeated. and he had one of the longest win streaks in UFC history, which win streaks versus title reigns is probably the more apples to apples comparison between the new champs and the old champs, right? Because even Anderson Silva, with all of his title wins, is only like a 16-fight win streak or something because he fought for the belt in his second UFC fight. So that's where, in that way, he compares very favorably to these older fighters. And again, it's welterweight. He's got great wins at welterweight. He never lost in his prime. He went up on short notice to fight Khamzat Chimaev, of all fucking people. Arguably wins, because he arguably won rounds 2 and 3, and round 1 was arguably not 10-8. So arguably wins, arguably gets a draw, ultimately loses. But that's on short notice, up a weight class, gets one of the scariest guys sports ever seen. Insane. As an old man, it's like a 36, 37-year-old. Like, and then, yes, comes back, age 38, beats, Joaquin Buckley, who's ranked like 6, is on a 6-fight win streak, is looking like quite the promising prospect, and just comfortably beats him. And yeah, people are trying to downplay it because, Buckley's get-ups were so terrible, which they were, but it doesn't fucking matter. Like, this is a stacked welterweight division. That guy earned his number 6 spot, had all the motivation to get past this old man, and Usman fucking showed up and delivered at 38 years old. So, he's playing with the house, what's the expression? He's playing with house money at this point. Like, he is one of the greats. No doubt about it to me. And that's why, like I was showing this list to my buddy, and he was like, man, you got Usman ahead of all these 2-division champs. And, I mean, I've just said why. I think his run in his prime is not unmatched, but it's up there. And he didn't lose until he was past his prime. And he's got some pretty fucking good post-prime performances against Khamzat and against Buckley. So I think he belongs where he's at, which is number 13. Number 12, the now, in hindsight, very underrated, very underappreciated by these newer fans, these newer commentators, these newer YouTubers, Dominick Cruz at number 12. Number 12, Dominick Cruz. Okay, people do not realize what Cruz has done, okay? Yes, he moved around a lot. Yes, he won a lot of decisions. Yes, some of those decisions were close. Yes, several of his opponents went on to be flyweights. However, even that, I don't count against him too much. Sure, sometimes you could see it was the size difference, like against Mighty Mouse, he was able to just kind of bully him around in the wrestling. Because Mighty Mouse is kind of a small flyweight anyways. That's why he, like MMA Shea was talking about this just the other day. But, you watch him against Tim Elliott, Mighty Mouse, that is, you can see the size difference, and that's at flyweight. So, sure, that happened. But, we've seen flyweights do very well at bantamweight. Whether it's Figueiredo, whether it's Cejudo, John Dodson, like I said, he has a fucking win over TJ Dillashaw, for Christ's sake. Had other wins at bantamweight later in his career. I'm not going to hold that too much against Cruz that those guys were small. And if you look at Cruz's prime, he also kind of didn't lose, okay? He lost to Faber I checked the other day for my notes, but Cruz was 2 years into his pro career when he lost to Faber the first time. And then he beat him in 2 subsequent rematches. Okay, so that's effectively erased as a loss. And then he didn't lose until he was 32 against Garbrandt. And this is another example where primes are not the same for everybody. Dominick Cruz at 32 is not the same as someone else at 32. Because Dominick Cruz had fucked his knees to death. And that's kind of his fault because we all assume it's because of all the footwork stuff. But nevertheless, he was just not the same man physically at 32 as he was when he was 26. So Cruz, for his actual prime, basically never lost. Because he was so young in the Faber fight and he avenged it twice. And then he didn't lose until he was physically past it. Now, in his prime, and people will downgrade him because he only had, 3 title defenses or something. Yeah, that's because he got forced to vacate because he got injured. What you should look at is how many title wins he has. Dominick Cruz has as many title wins as Alexander Volkanovski. They're both at 7, I believe it is. It's 6 or 7, but I did verify it's the same number. And Cruz has great wins. When he won the belt against Bowles, that was a great win. Faber is a great win. You know, Scott Jorgensen at the time was a great win. You know, Mighty Mouse, McCall, Benavidez, you know, these are good wins. But he got injured, had to take 3 years off, came back, fought the number 5 ranked Mitsugaki. Mitsugaki was on a 5-fight win streak in the UFC, ranked number 5. Cruz steamrolls him. Of a 3-year injury layoff, steamrolls him, TKOs him within a minute. It was like a minute, 10 seconds or something, but like in a minute, finishes him. Just bam. Gets injured again. Has to take 2 years off. Comes back, fights TJ Dillashaw, who will get on this list, you know, a top 20 fighter of all time, TJ Dillashaw, and beats him off a 2-year layoff. Only fought once in 5 years. You know, wins again after that. Like, he beats Faber after that. Like, this is greatness. Like, Dominick Cruz is an all-time great fighter. And then he loses to Garbrandt, he loses to Cejudo. He, as an old kind of washed dude, he beats Kenny and he beats Munoz. Those are ranked wins. So he's got longevity too, even though, you know, he's got this early past prime period. But when he's well past his prime, he's still got ranked wins. Like, you know, greatness. Like, I get it. Everyone's high on Merab. You know, we'll see if Merab is on this list too. But Cruz needs to be respected. Okay? Just Sterling is not better than Cruz. All right, moving on. Number 11, Max Holloway. Some people are going to be mad he's not higher. Tough shit. Max Holloway, excellent fighter. Max Holloway beat prime Jose Aldo. Beat him twice. Steamrolled him. That by itself probably means he should be on this list. You know, but he had to, you know, he didn't have that many title defenses, but he had that Junior Dos Santos thing where he had to clear out half the division before he got a title shot. Beats Aldo twice. You know, sets the record for most strikes landed in a fight, breaks that record. You know, loses to Poirier, yeah, whatever. Up a weight class. You know, has losses to Poirier and I think Bermudez and McGregor, but those are when he was green as hell, super young, only had less than 10 fights. You know, has the giant win streak, loses to Poirier, comes back down, beats Edgar. You know, what hurts him is that he lost to Volk 3 times while he was in his prime. That's, yeah, that's really hurting him. That's really hurting him. Now, losing to Volk, who, you know, you'll see where he is on this list, not the end of the world, you know. It's kind of like Cormier losing to Jones, you know. It's not the end of the world, but it still hurts you. It still hurts you to clearly not be the best guy in the division for some huge amount of your career. And then you go up to lightweight and you lose, you know, which by itself wouldn't hurt you, but then when you're also not the best guy at featherweight, you know, like, it hurts him. He also, you know, I haven't talked about this for every single fighter, but like now that we're starting to get into the higher rankings, he also, you know, didn't fight the most diverse skill set of opponents. You know, he fought Ortega, which is nice because Ortega is such a grappling threat. But like, who are the wrestlers Max Holloway has fought? You know, Ricardo Lamas? I mean, like, come on. Like, you know, he mostly fights strikers. You know, whether that's at lightweight or featherweight. And that's cool, then he gets great fights, but, you know, it's, compared to some other people, you know, again, like I'm starting to be a little more critical because we're starting to get into this top 10 territory, but there's a lot of great wins, obviously. You know, he beat Pettis, he beat Lamas, he beat Stevens, he beat Edgar, he beat Swanson, he beat you know, Gaethje, he beat Aldo twice, he beat Ortega, he beat Cater, on and on. Beat Allen. Like, great longevity, too. Like, to lose the belt and just keep beating the contenders, beat Rodriguez, beat Allen, beat those guys. And yeah, and since he knocked out Gaethje at lightweight, he's got 2 divisional success. You know, he's not a champion or anything, but that adds to his legacy. That adds to his greatness. But yeah, it is mostly that, his success at lightweight is mixed. His time as a champion at featherweight was limited because Volk showed up. He hasn't had to fight the most diverse mix of fighters, I would say. It's been mostly strikers. And we'll see what happens. Like, he could easily rise in the ranks. Like, if he beats Poirier, if he has more success at lightweight, like, because I'm making this video before the third Poirier fight, he could definitely climb the ranks. But for me, it's hard for me to place him above anyone else who's in the top 10. So for the moment, that's where Max Holloway is. He is at number 11. Finally to the top 10. At number 10, I have Fedor Emlienenko. Now, spoiler alert, Stipe Miocic is not on this fucking list. This pisses me off. Okay, the fact that people are ranking Stipe Miocic as a better heavyweight than Fedor it makes me want to choke somebody. And it's Jack Slack has floated that idea around, and everyone knows Slack is probably the greatest mind in MMA analysis, but that's just fucking crazy. How is Stipe better? And I get it. You're gonna say oh, it's better competition. And look at the names. Think about this. Stipe has never beaten someone in their prime. Hasn't. Never beaten anyone in their prime. Mark Hunt, past his prime. Andrei Arlovski, past his prime. Verdum, past his prime. Overeem, past his prime. Junior Dos Santos, he fucking lost to Junior Dos Santos, then he beat him when he was past his prime. He was probably past his prime when he lost to him. And sure, he was young too, but still, when he beat him, Dos Santos was past it. Francis Ngannou, not in his prime yet. Francis Ngannou didn't know how to fucking wrestle yet. And that cuts both ways, because when Ngannou came back and smashed Stipe was past his prime. So he beat Ngannou pre-prime, Ngannou beat him post-prime. Fair enough. But he has no fucking, Daniel Cormier was an old man when he beat him. And yeah, Stipe was getting old too, but Cormier was older. Cormier beat him when they were both younger. Stipe's got the 2 wins, but that's, and these are still great wins. Literally every win I just listed is a great win. This is where it's not binary. It's not, you're either prime or washed. Okay? It's not binary like that. Beating a past prime Junior Dos Santos, when Junior Dos Santos just beat Ben Rothwell, who was just on this streak where he knocked out Overeem, he submitted Josh Barnett, that Junior Dos Santos is still a great win. It's just not prime. It's not the Junior Dos Santos that Cain Velasquez beat. Okay? It just isn't. Beating Overeem when he's on his streak, where he's knocking out Arlovski, he's knocking out Dos Santos, that's all well and good. It's just not the Overeem that beat Brock Lesnar. And beating Verdum when he's old is not the same as beating the Verdum that beat Fedor. And beating Arlovski when he's old is not the same as beating him when he was the champion. So this is just beating Ngannou when he has had 10 fights and can't wrestle is not the same as beating him in the rematch, right? It's just not the same. So now to act like that is going to make Stipe the best heavyweight of all time when Fedor has the longevity. Fedor was clearly the best, because Fedor came in the era where there were multiple organizations, but it didn't matter. Fedor was always the clear number 1 heavyweight, because because just compare the Pride guys and the UFC guys. The Pride guys ultimately proved they were better, because Barnett, who, originally a UFC guy, beat Couture, heavyweight champion, but he did the lion's share of his best work in Pride, and most people think of him more as a Pride guy. But either way, he was in Pride. Barnett beat Arlovski. Barnett beat Couture. Barnett beat Mir. Okay. Nogueira beat Couture. Hunt beat Mir. Nogueira beat Sylvia. And Mir did the best because Mir beat Mir beat Nogueira and Krokop, but he lost to Hunt, he lost to Barnett, he lost to Fedor when they were both old, so we're not going to really count it, but they were really old, so I'm not going to count that. But Fedor beat Arlovski, he beat Sylvia, so those UFC guys, he just proved he was better than. He beat Hunt, he beat other good names, he beat, the first win over Coleman was good. The win over Schilt is good. The win over Randleman is good. The win over, it slips my mind. But anyways, but most importantly, he beat Nogueira twice and he beat Crow Cop when they were in their primes. Stipe has no wins like that. Okay, he has no wins that are equivalent to the Nogueira and Crow Cop wins for Fedor. He simply does not. And Fedor did this during a 30-plus fight, like, unbeaten streak that lasted over 10 fucking years, where, you know, he was just clearly the top banana. They called him the last emperor for a fucking reason. They call Stipe the last emperor for a reason. Yeah, and he didn't lose until he was past his prime. Just like Kamaru, you know, just like Cruz. Didn't lose until he was past his prime, okay? You could see him, you could see he was already starting to diminish. Fedor's prime ended in the Silva fight. You can see him starting to go off in the Arlovski win, the Rogers win. Rogers was a top 10 win. He just knocked out Arlovski. You know, great win for Fedor. You know, the idea that Stipe is better than him, horseshit. And Fedor has wins against, you know, yeah, he has a padded record. You know, just like Vanderlei Silva and just like a lot of the Pride guys with the huge win streaks. There's a lot of, like, cans in that record. A lot of great wins, too, but there are cans. However, those are also just chances to lose, and some of those are meaningful. Like when he fought, I believe his name was Oyama. He was a judo Olympian, I think gold medalist. He was 7-0 in MMA, all finishes. Fedor fought him in one of the Pride tournaments. That's like the sort of guy that is going to show up and throw a fucking wrench in your win streak, right? That's the sort of, like, random dude you're going to fight in a fucking tournament that's going to make problems. You know, look at Daniel Cormier was that guy for Bigfoot, for Josh Barnett in a tournament as a 7-0, 8-0 guy when he fought them. Right? That, like, I mean, and Cormier proved he was better than this Oyama guy, but, like, that's the kind of win or the kind of opponent that's going to fuck shit up for you. Fedor wrecks him. Fedor submits him in, like, 2 minutes. And yeah, that guy lost to Nogueira after that, and then I think never fought again, but, like, you know, so who knows what his potential actually was, but, like, even just little wins like that, like, are meaningful. You know, he beat Heath Herring. Like, that was a good win at the time. Heath Herring was a contender. You know, Fedor, you know, and Fedor, I haven't touched on this a lot. I've kind of skipped over it a bit, but, like, I talked about guys who, like, changed the meta, which up until now we haven't had too many. I would say Max Holloway changed the meta a bit by helping push the high volume era, you know, because up until guys like Holloway, we didn't have a lot of these, like, pace pushers. We had some. We had, at the time, Rich Franklin was, like, a pace pushing fighter. Forrest Griffin was a pace pushing fighter. Like, Chael Sonnen was a pace pushing fighter. But, like, the gold standard was, like, the Diaz brothers, you know, mainly Nick Diaz, for the guys who would use volume to overwhelm people. And Max Holloway, boom, took that to a whole new level. Like, whole new level. You know, like I said, set and broke his own record for most strikes landed in a fight. So, like, that's Holloway. Cruz, Dominick Cruz helped change the meta. Like, people didn't all become him. Like, people were saying, like, oh, is this like what the new fighters are going to look like? And I think Zane Simon has talked about this quite a bit. Like, of course they weren't going to look like Dominick Cruz because he fights like a weirdo. He is taking Muhammad Ali and Willie Pep footwork and doing it in this extremely physically taxing way where he's, like, leaping into side lunges and shit in a way where you're like, yeah, no wonder his knees got wrecked. And he's hit, all of his punches are swings, but he lands them because he sets them up. But, you know, so, like, of course people were going to replicate what Cruz was doing, but he helped usher in the sort of, like, Matrix footwork era, you know, whatever. Like, the MMA angles, you know. And what I mean by that is he helped usher in an era of people focusing more on footwork, people focusing on stance switching. Like, he walked so that guys like Dilashaw could run, you know, and then later guys like Sandhagen. That's where I like the Cruz, Dillashaw, Sandhagen, you know, old guard beating new guard, but controversially, where they're kind of fighting the new version of themselves. Because Sandhagen also a stance switching, more like modern striker, you know, kind of a new version of what Dillashaw was, which is kind of a new version of what Cruz was. You know, so Cruz gets credit. How this all comes back to Fedor is one of the first, like, modern fighters. the first like true MMA fighter, the guy who was well-rounded, and not just well-rounded, but mixed the skills. He would strike into his takedowns. You know, he had ground and pound. He would strike on the exit. He had submissions. He had submissions on top and bottom. Like, he was, like, he created MMA in a way, you know, not literally, but like he created, like he is the first like true MMA fighter, Fedor. So, and good diversity of opponents. Fought wrestlers, fought jiu-jitsu guys, fought strikers. You know, it's not as diverse as some people. You know, it's heavyweight, so it's diverse by that standard. But Fedor is profoundly, you know, underrated. You know, he, like Cruz, like Henderson, like Couture, like Penn, you know, getting overlooked in this new era. But that's enough on him. Let's move on. Bear with me. Bear with me. My computer is falling asleep on me. I'm pretty sure I know who's next, but I want to confirm. Bear with me. Yep, number 9. This is going to ruffle feathers. Islam Makhachev. Only number 9. Hate to say it. The win streak. Insane. He broke the record for title defenses at lightweight. Wild. Beat Oliveira. Beat Volkanovski. Pretty fucking nuts. Now, here's where all the caveats come in. These are where the asterisks come in. He had a big win streak to fight for the belt. Fair enough. I think it was 10 fight. I think it was a 10-fight win streak. However, a lot of people didn't think he deserved the shot because he barely beat anybody. You know, his like main wins were that he beat Hooker and Bobby Green, and one of those wins is aged greatly, and one of them is aged terribly. You know, they're both good at the time. He also has a lot of wins, like not only over featherweights, which, you know, I don't care about because everyone he beats, every one of his title wins is against a featherweight. Oliveira used to be a featherweight. Volk, twice, featherweight. Poirier used to be a featherweight. Moicano used to be a featherweight. I'm not even going to hold that really against him because featherweights just do great at lightweight, and Oliveira and, you know, and even Hooker, which wasn't a title win but was a contender win, former featherweight, I think went to featherweight after that fight, I think. I think the Allen fight is after that one. I'm not going to hold it against him as featherweights do great at lightweight, and Oliveira and Poirier filled out, so they like won't make featherweight again. But, you know, that's where him trying to say, like, why should I fight Ilya? I'm just fighting featherweights. It's like, yeah, it's what lightweight is, just featherweights, except for you. You know, except for you and Armin and like one other person, and Patty. Like, those are the lightweights. Everyone else is a fucking featherweight. So, where this matters is because a lot of these fights are on short notice. Green fight, Bobby Green, short notice. Dan Hooker, short notice. Volk rematch, short notice. Moicano fight, short notice. Moicano didn't you know, so short notice, like he shouldn't have even been fighting him. He was ranked like number 9 or something. I can't remember exactly, but he, you know, it's a bad win to have break the record for title defenses at lightweight. You know what I mean? The win itself was exceptional. To Darce Moicano, who's got very legit jiu-jitsu, to Darce him that quickly, very impressive. Not going to knock him for that. And yeah, Islam seems to rise to the occasion. Islam seems to improve with his quality of opposition because he was getting decisions a lot on the come-up. And then once he became a champion, he started finishing almost everybody. Respect. But, you know, it's... The Volk wins are amazing. Volk is an all-time great. But, man, if there was ever a featherweight that, like, wasn't going to cut it at lightweight, you know, Volk stands out, you know, because he's so small. He's got such poor finishing ability. You know, it's hard, you know, when you're that much bigger and you're a kicker, you're a grappler, like, I don't know, it's hard to know exactly what to think of the Volk wins, because I have heard the argument that short notice or no, the fact that Islam came out looking for the knockout, looking for the kicks, which Volk is vulnerable to, rather than trying to out-wrestle him, was just going to work no matter what. That if he'd done that in the first fight, he would have knocked him out. Volk had a full camp for the second fight, he would have knocked him out. That could well be true. That could well be true. But at the same time, it's like when Volk had a full camp and wasn't 34, he almost beat Islam. I scored that fight for Islam, but By some of the modern scoring, you could argue Volk won that. I didn't argue that, but you could argue that. If it were Pride scoring, you definitely would have won, and it wasn't Pride scoring, but if it were. I was talking to my buddy about it, and he said, never in my life have I more wanted to see a 7-round fight, because imagine if that first Volk fight went 7 rounds. We know what would have happened. And then he's 34, and a short notice rematch gets knocked out. Yeah, and so that's hard to know. The Oliveira win is great. Oliveira, you know, probably an early prime peaker, but like, nevertheless, to do what he did to him on that win streak, he was still only 32, I think. That's pretty fucking great. Pretty fucking great. The win streak is great. We'll see what he does going forward. We'll see how he does against Jack Della Maddalena. He's another guy. I said this about Holloway. It's more true about Islam. Islam has room to get a few more wins and like really climb this ranking. But like, man, I'm seeing people put Islam at #1 these days. I just can't get behind that. Like, he just doesn't have the wins. Like, Poirier did not deserve the title shot. Moicano did not deserve the title shot. He had a lot of wins, but the quality of those wins and the lead up to the title, not great. Like, it's really just like the Oliveira and Volk wins, which are great wins, but like, you know, and I'm clearly crediting him because he's number 9, you know, but like, he's ahead of Fedor, he's ahead of Max Holloway, he's ahead of Kamaru Usman, but like, man, I can't put him any higher, you know. I know it sounds like I'm being a hater, but I just can't get behind it more than that. Now, one thing that Islam should get credit for is the diversity of his opponents, you know. And I was saying this before he fought Oliveira, because I was like, look, beat Tsarukyan, one of the best wrestlers in the division. Beat Davi Ramos, you know, and Moises. You know, great jiu-jitsu guys. Now, the Davi Ramos win, not as good because, like, he couldn't take him down, and then the only grappling happened after he dropped him with a knee, and he just ground and pounded him, so it's like, eh. But he submitted Moises, who's a legit jiu-jitsu guy, so, like, you know, pretty good. And he beat strikers. He beat Hooker, and he beat Drew Dober. Beat both those guys. And he beat Bobby Green, whom at the time I was kind of looking at as like the kind of good all-round. I know he's more of a striker, but the good all-rounder veteran, you know. So coming into that Oliveira fight, I was like, you know, Islam's really proven himself against a lot of good different dudes. And then he fights Oliveira, who's not only well-rounded, but a true jiu-jitsu threat. It beats Volk, who's well-rounded, pace pusher, great scrambles, great striker. Like, Islam gets a lot of credit for that, I think. The diversity of the people he's had to fight and whom he's beaten. Pretty fucking legit. So, I don't know, maybe if I meditated on it a little bit more, I'd rank him like slightly higher. But he's not cracking top 5 for me. Like, that's just not happening. There's just too many people ahead of him. So that is what it is. People aren't going to like it, but so be it. Number 9, Islam Makhachev. Number 8. Anderson Silva. Okay, people are hating on Anderson Silva right now. Fucking bullshit. Like, okay, yes. Not a great middleweight division. Some lame wins. James Irvin is a fucking title defense. Patrick Cote is a fucking title defense. It's not great. I won't lie to you. Got a quick, you know, had that elbow knockout, that up elbow knockout, the Ong Bak elbow knockout. On the regional scene, beats Chris Lieben in his debut. Renato Laranja makes fun of him for it in his face. Hilarious. And then he fights Rich Franklin for the belt right away. Yeah, easy run. Beats Franklin. Yes, I get where people are criticizing him, and I get where he should be ranked lower than we used to rank him. People used to put him number 1. He shouldn't be number 1. You know, I've only got him at number 8. But the disrespect for what this guy's done, though, has gone too fucking far. And people just, this is what I was getting at early on. This is young fans who just don't know people's resumes, okay? Or new fans who just don't know people's resumes. So let's break this down. Okay, people are at least giving him some credit for like the Dan Henderson and the Vitor wins. That's good, okay? What he did to Dan Henderson was fucking nuts. He was like tanking Henderson's punches, hurting him with strikes, fucking him up in the clinch, took his back, choked him out. Like, that's one of the best performances you'll ever fucking see is Anderson versus Dan Henderson. Vitor, front kick to the face knockout. Sensational. TRT Vitor. Yeah, that's... Vitor, like, ate that kick and then proceeded to take it out on Bisping and Henderson and Rockhold and everyone else afterwards, I think. Insane. The Chael wins are very good. I get it. Anderson had a weakness against wrestling. That's a bad look. It is a bad look. It shows a lack of well-roundedness. But people are underrating Chael. Chael, you know, it reminds me of when he retired and Luke Thomas said he wasn't a great fighter, and then Chael made that response video, and then Luke made the response video. And it all got messy, but like, and Chael was exaggerating his accomplishments, but Chael has accomplished a lot. Chael should have been the lineal middleweight champion. The only reason he wasn't is because Paulo Filho missed weight defending his own title against Chael in WEC. Chael beats him, and instead of Chael getting the belt and Filho not being eligible, the belt's just not on the line. Chael doesn't get the belt. Fucking bullshit. And because Filho missed weight, he doesn't get the lineal middleweight title either because Filho was the lineal champion. So that's bullshit. That fucked Chael over. That's stupid. Chael, going into both Anderson fights, was looking pretty unstoppable. He's on the TRT at the time. We all know he was on everything else. He's open about it. He popped a million times. Going into the first fight, like, look at how he mauled Nate Marquardt. Look at how he mauled Yushin Okami. Two guys Anderson beat as well. He puts a whooping on Anderson. Anderson comes back, submits him. Excellent. Going into the rematch, look at what he did to Brian Stan. Chael Sonnen, that is. Look at what he did to Michael Bisping. Much closer fight, but he, you know, pretty comfortably beat Michael Bisping. Like, Chael was a great fighter in his prime, you know, for what he was. You know, and he's right. He wasn't the first guy, but he was one of the first guys to be ranked top 10 in two separate divisions because he went to light heavyweight. He beat Shogun. Yeah, beating Chael twice in that era is pretty legit. Now, where it goes against Anderson is not only that there's some fluff mixed in there, but this is also a time where there was other leagues, other organizations with good middleweights, because Strikeforce during Anderson's reign had Jacare Souza, it had Luke Rockhold, it had Tim Kennedy, like, and I forget who it was, someone described Tim Kennedy as like the better Chael that just got less attention, and there's an argument to be made there. So, and yeah, if those guys were just in the UFC the whole time, would Anderson have beaten all of them? You know, maybe not. We won't know. But where people are totally, people are just not aware of this aspect of Anderson's resume. Anderson doesn't just have two divisional success, because a lot of people, it seems, don't even know that, because he went up to light heavyweight, not just once but twice, because he did it to Stephen Bonner. But the Forrest Griffin fight was at light heavyweight. Griffin was the former champion. It was his first fight after losing the belt. He was ranked top 5. He's probably ranked like 1 or 2 or something. But, you know, former champ, just coming off the loss. And Forrest Griffin, yeah, you look at his striking, it's sloppy. You know, it looks bad in hindsight. You know, Anderson picked him apart. But Griffin is like a legit fighter. You know, Griffin beat Rampage. Griffin beat Shogun. Griffin beat Rich Franklin. Griffin beat Tito Ortiz twice. Like, you know, a sloppy guy. You know, lost the rematch to Shogun, you know, whatever, but like a legit light heavyweight and a big dude, you know. And Anderson just goes Matrix mode on him and obliterates him. And a lot of people are kind of overlooking that. But what no one has ever talked about is that Anderson Silva at welterweight early in his career, welterweight, not middleweight, welterweight, beat Hayato Sakurai, who was the number 2 welterweight in the world. When he was undefeated, he handed Hayato Sakurai his first loss. And then Hughes beat him later and proved that Hughes was the best welterweight. And then Penn beat Hughes, which is why Penn's title win at welterweight is so good, like I talked about. But the first loss that Hayato Sakurai experienced was from Anderson Silva, and it was at welterweight. So Anderson beat the number 2 welterweight at welterweight, had, you know, a record-breaking win streak and title streak at middleweight in the UFC, and beat some really good, you know, not everyone he beat was great, but he beat Chael twice, he beat Vitor, he beat Dan Henderson, and he had, you know, a top 5, maybe even like top 2 win at light heavyweight when he went Matrix mode on Forrest Griffin, former champion. Like, I get it. Anderson isn't the best fighter to ever live. He's not number 1, but like, some people aren't even putting him in like their top 20 anymore. Like, what? Read Wikipedia. Like, just read Wikipedia if you didn't see this stuff when it happened. Like, I don't know what to fucking tell you guys. Horseshit. Moving on. Number 7, Khabib Nermagomedov. Difficult to place because Khabib retired so early. His resume is pretty immaculate. You know, padded because he's got a bunch of like 2-round wins against scrubs in Russia, and I think his like 15th win was against like a 0-0 guy or something crazy. Like, pretty padded. Retired early. We didn't get to see him fight Oliveira. We didn't get to see him fight Arman. We didn't get to see him fight kind of the guys that would have been up and coming. But damn, does he belong to be here, because he's got the dominance. You know, the only asterisk on his whole record to me is that dicey win over, I believe it was Gleison Tebow, the roided up jiu-jitsu guy who he couldn't take down and went like almost neck and neck strike-wise. There's that, bad luck, whatever. But that was like his second UFC fight or something. And he got the win, unanimous. So, it is what it is. But aside from that, just dominance. Dominance. Hardly lost a round. You know, we've all heard it. Never got cut, never got dropped. That's true. Barely even got stung. You know, Oliveira, you know, connected once or twice. Or not, McGregor, excuse me, connected once or twice. Poirier landed a decent shot. Johnson landed a decent shot. Gaethje landed some good low kicks. That's about it. Like, you just can't say much about the guy against him as far as his performances. And yes, his title reign was against strikers. And yes, guys like MMA Shea are holding that against him and saying Islam's quality of competition was so much higher, yada yada. You know, people are underrating Khabib's competition because, yes, strikers for his title reign, but prime peak strikers. You know, I think it was Mexican martial arts. You know, GM Grandmaster was talking about this, but you know, those guys were really in their primes. Like McGregor coming off of the Alvarez win, coming off of the 10 rounds against Mayweather, loses. Poirier coming off of his greatest stretch. You know, it's the stretch where he won the interim belt. It's the stretch where he beat Alvarez, the stretch where he beat Pettis, beat Gaethje, beat Holloway, boom, loses to Khabib. Gaethje, it's when he had that turnaround. He knocks out James Vick, he knocks out Barboza, he knocks out Cerrone. He ends Tony Ferguson's streak, wins the interim belt, loses to Khabib. And in each case, decisively, Khabib mauls these guys, breaks them, makes them tap. I think that was like one of Grandmaster's points. He goes, you know, he didn't just catch these guys. He didn't just, Volk stepped back and his hand was down and he caught him, which wasn't by accident. Topuria set that up. But Khabib broke these guys. You know, these are guys who've trained their whole life for this, and he made them effectively beg for mercy. He was on their back. You know, I mean, I think he just choked Gaethje out. But Poirier and McGregor, you know, they tapped. You know, and he didn't just catch him, he broke him first. Broke him down, tapped him. And on the come up, he had great wins. Michael Johnson, great win at the time. Barboza, great win at the time. I know these wins haven't aged the best in the recent years, but at the time, those were great wins. Iaquinta, good win. Not, you know, shouldn't have been for a title fight, but those were the circumstances. But a very good win, just kind of in a record, in a resume. But where people are really underrating him, Pat Healy, amazing win. Pat Healy, very big, very good grappler. Pat Healy was just coming off of a submission win over a prime Jim Miller. Okay? It got overturned because Healy got busted for marijuana. Like, fucking bullshit, stupid, that he earned that win. He should have that win. Pat Healy, and Miller was ranked like 7 when he beat him. So Healy was like top 7 to 5 or something. And a big, strong grappler. And Khabib did Khabib shit to him. You know, had to work for it, but by the end of round 3, he was mauling him. Rafael dos Anjos, during his prime, one of the best lightweights to ever live, great grappler, well-rounded, has this reputation of like losing to wrestlers, but most of that was at welterweight, you know? I don't think most wrestlers at lightweight are doing shit to him. I mean, not that they couldn't beat him, but like, you know, if you put RDA in with Frankie Edgar or Benson Henderson or Clay Guida or, you know, whoever. Well, Clay Guida beat him, but that was maybe a bad example. Although that was like earlier, that was like pre-prime Dos Santos. Or, my mind's getting foggy, this is a long video. That was pre-prime RDA. But, you know, I think I've just talked myself out of my own argument a little bit. But nevertheless, like, mauling RDA like Khabib did, still nuts. You know, even if he wasn't the best against wrestlers, he was still a very well-rounded, very game dude. Great cardio, you know. He arguably beat Colby Covington. I saw that fight live in Chicago. Going into the decision, I didn't know who would win, you know. RDA actually landed more strikes, and they were better strikes because he was actually putting his body into it, like, you know, and not just throwing arm punches like Covington was. And he got some takedowns of his own. It's just that Covington, you know, pushed the pace and was having the fight he wanted and everything. That's why they gave it to him. And fair enough. But, you know, to beat RDA at lightweight in his prime, pretty nuts. So for Khabib to do all of that, have that dominance, have that insane title run, just leave on top. And you've got like the gym stories too, where it's like, I'm not saying he'd beat everyone that Makhachev beat, and I'm not saying Makhachev won't go down as the better fighter than Khabib when all is said and done, but like at present, I've got Khabib higher. And it's hard to ignore the fact that, you know, the story goes that he big brothers Islam in the gym, you know. And sure, that's not, you know, always a guarantee of something, because you've also got stories of Aljamain Sterling big brothering Merab, and no one's going to have Sterling ahead of Merab at this point. But, you know, it's hard to ignore that. It's hard to, you know, it's hard not to look at what Islam has done and not think, yeah, Khabib would just do the same thing to these people. With exception, he's not going to head kick Volk and whatever. And I've heard, you know, I remember hearing MMA Shea argue that he would have gotten guillotined by Oliveira, which I don't believe, but I'm pretty sure he would have game planned for it, my friend. I mean, just look at how he games plans for grapplers. Look at how he adapted, how he takes people down when he fought Gaethje. You know, remember everyone talking about Gaethje's wrestling and his takedown defense and saying like, oh, the only time Gaethje's been taken down is when they cut the corner on this double leg, and he doesn't normally do that, and he comes out and does it. You know, I'm pretty sure he mauls Oliveira. You know, I don't know, and I love Oliveira, but anyways, moving on. Number 6, Merab Dvalishvili. Now, Merab's a tricky one. Clearly, since I have him ahead of Cruz and I have him ahead of Dilashaw, and since I don't have Sterling on this list, I obviously think Merab is the best bantamweight to ever live. Now, where it's tricky, and this gets into a recurring theme in this video, but people's primes. People just don't get how primes work, and people are exaggerating Merab's resume because they don't know how fucking primes work. Aldo was past his prime when Merab beat him. Henry Cejudo was past his prime when Merab beat him. Henry Cejudo was like 36 when Merab beat him. Okay? Look at Henry Cejudo in the second Demetrius Johnson fight. Look at the pace, look at the scrambling, look at the quality of grappling, and tell me that Merab wilts him in the second round. Like he did in their actual fight when he was 36. Tell me that happens. Okay? With a straight face, tell me that fucking happens. Of course not. Bullshit. Now, would Merab have beaten a prime Cejudo? Yeah, probably. But, like, not like that. And the one he beat is not prime. So that's who he's got. You know, it's not who he would have beat, it's who he actually beat. He beat a post-prime Cejudo. You know, Marlon Moraes, past his prime. John Dodson, past his prime. You know? I feel like there's a name I'm forgetting. Cejudo. Well, yeah. Well, so those wins all past their prime. Still good wins. The Aldo win is still a good win. The way he won wasn't good, but like he still beat him. The Cejudo win is still a good win. You know, past his prime, but still a good win. Moraes win, past his prime, still a good win. But it's just not what, you know, it's the Stipe thing, it's the Topuria thing, it's all, you know, people just don't know how fucking primes work, you know. They say, oh, you still want to fight at some point, or you barely lost to someone, so you must still be in your prime. It's like, no. They're on the decline. They're not washed, they're not dog shit, they don't need to retire yet, but they're not in their prime anymore. But Merab, it's 2 wins mainly, but it's really 4 wins that are really elevating Merab. Because yeah, he's got this great win streak. You know, he's getting up there with the Usmans and the Makhachevs and, you know, the Anderson Silvas and these guys with these big long win streaks. He's got the great win streak, but it's really the wins over Jan, O'Malley, and Umar that elevate him. Now, not only is that a great diversity of opponents, because you've got this big, long, rangy, incredibly dangerous, but also very skilled striker, very thoughtful striker in O'Malley, a guy with great footwork, great feints, great jab. You've got him, who he beat twice, comfortably the first time, submitted him the second time. You've got Jan, who's one of the most well-rounded fighters you'll ever see, was well-rounded early on. You look at his wins he traded with Magomedov or Magomed, whatever that Russian guy whose name I forget, but who he traded wins with. Like, look at how well-rounded Jan already is. Look at how strong his grappling already is in those fights. Jan is sensational. And then Umar, less proven. Yeah, we all, you know, we know he, you know, kind of leapfrogged the division. He got that 1 win over Sandhagen, which was great, but then gets a title shot. But a lot of people, myself included, were picking him to beat Merab. Because it was like, yeah, I mean, how's, you know, the grappling will be so strong, and he's got this, he's bigger, he's longer, he's got this great striking. Merab's already 34. I think Merab was 34 going into that one. I can't remember. He might have only been 34 going into the O'Malley rematch. But either way, he's winning at 34. But Merab, losing my train of thought. Merab beats all these guys. You know, and he embarrasses them. Like, the first O'Malley fight was a little lame, but he still comfortably won. But he just broke Peter Yan in maybe the greatest performance we've ever seen in a fight ever. That Yan fight. He embarrasses Umar and breaks him. You know, that fight wasn't as lopsided as it seemed. You know, people are pointing out, oh, round 5 was actually pretty close. It might have been going to Umar until that last, you know, until he caught him. All well and good, but just the body language and everything. He was breaking his spirit, you know, like he told him he would. And to do that, and yeah, Umar, you know, not the most proven guy ever, but he passes the fucking eye test, okay? Like, if it's kind of like the Covington wins for Usman. It's like, maybe Umar never wins a belt, maybe he doesn't go on to have all these great things, but if we're going to pretend that win isn't of just an insane quality for Merab, then that's bullshit. And so it's really those, like, 2 to 4 wins. It's the Jan, O'Malley, Umar, O'Malley wins for Merab that really take him from being someone who might have not even been on this list to, like, top 6 for me. Like, he, you know, and in the eye test way, I mentioned the eye test, like, in the sort of classical pound for pound who would win way, I'm not convinced there's any fighter who's ever lived that could beat Merab if they were the same size. That sort of pace approach and with the takedowns that he uses, I don't know, man. Like, I don't know that GSP can handle that. I don't know that Jon Jones can handle that. I don't know that Khabib can handle that. I don't know that Volkanovski can handle that. I don't know that, you know, TJ Dillashaw can handle that. Like, I'm really not convinced. Like, I think Merab in his prime, pound for pound, might just be the greatest thing we've ever seen. You know, so that's why he's number 6. I think he belongs there. Moving on, number 5, Jose Aldo. Now, people are underrating Aldo. You know, I think they're correctly pointing out that he lost in his prime. Like, you can't look at the McGregor loss and the Holloway losses, and probably even the Volk loss, and say those weren't his prime. The Volk, getting a little dicey. He was only like 32, I think, but that's an old 32. To put this in perspective, Aldo won a title fight in the WEC before Volk or Max had even fought. Okay? So that's just more time, more wear and tear, more stress, more everything, which means him at 32 isn't necessarily the same as everyone else at 32. Okay? But even if we want to count it, fair enough, whatever. Volk beats prime Aldo. And even if you don't want to count that, if you want to say this past prime, you really can't look at, especially the first Holloway fight and the McGregor fight, and say those weren't prime Aldo. That's like, the guy wasn't riddled with injuries, his chin wasn't gone, like, he was in his 20s, like, you just can't say he wasn't in his prime. So that hurts him. It hurts him that Holloway, especially Holloway, because, you can look at the McGregor one and say, yeah, but might he have won a rematch? That seems like a, an unlikely first outcome that was certainly that adjustments could be made about in a rematch. But the Holloway fight, back to back, to lose the same way like that, it just proved Holloway was always going to be the better man. And I think Volk was always going to be the better man. So that hurts Aldo. But why is Aldo ranked so high? Why is he ranked ahead of Holloway? Well, it's his success, it's his longevity. Like, he was a younger champion than Jon Jones. And the WEC division just became the UFC division, so in my book, he's the youngest champ ever. He had a great run as a champion. I think he had 7 or so defenses. Loses, comes back. We talked about Renan Barão kind of being a broken man after Dilashaw beat him. I think the Holloway losses especially could have easily broken Aldo. That could be the shit you never really come back from. Look at how he came back. He comes back from the McGregor loss. He beats Edgar, becomes champ again, loses to Holloway twice, terribly. Beats Stevens, beats Moicano, has a weird close fight with Volk, goes down, arguably beats Moraes, loses to Jan, goes on a 3-fight win streak against ranked dudes, beats Vera, beats Font, beats, who was the third one? Moonhouse. Loses a really ugly close fight against Merab. Wins again against Martinez, I think it was, and now is on a 2-fight losing streak. But that sort of longevity, to get the belt back after a loss, to beat, Frankie Edgar are his 2 best wins in my book. Frankie Edgar is a top 15 fighter of all time on my list. Beat him twice. Beat him in his prime. To do that, to come back from the Max losses, to beat top contenders, to go to these close fights with Merab and Volk when you're arguably past it in the Volk fight and definitely past it in the Merab fight, to put together 3 wins, to fight for a belt and then put together 3 legit ranked wins in the lower weight class, to lose to Merab and then still get another win against a surging up and coming contender, that sort of longevity. I think I've heard people compare him to the Roberto Duran of MMA. That's a good comparison. That sort of longevity is insane. That multi-divisional success is insane. That title run is insane. I know he lost to Max, but I think he belongs ahead of him. And I think he belongs top 5. And I think the fact that he lost to Max, the fact that people are putting him lower than Pantoja because he lost to Max in his prime. Meanwhile, Pantoja lost to fucking Figueiredo in his prime. What are we doing here? This is insane. The disrespect for the old champs is getting out of hand. And Aldo belongs top 5. Moving on, number 4, I have Mighty Mouse. I don't think I need to explain that much about this one. His skill is, he's maybe the most skilled fighter to ever live. He did not lose in his prime in his division, as far as I'm concerned. Is you can debate if he was still in his prime when he lost to Cejudo. You can debate if that's a loss or not. I mean, we're treating losses as official on this list, so he did lose to him, and I'm willing to count that as a win for Cejudo. But that's the sort of loss where they both look so good and it's so close, you almost want to count it as a win for both guys, honestly. Because they just both look like the best thing since sliced bread. And goes to 1, loses to I think that guy's name is Morales, the guy in one, his name is escaping me. Loses to him, beats him twice in the rematch. Like, the well-roundedness. Like, look at the knee he finishes that guy with in the rematch. Look at the suplex to armbar he finished Ray Borg with. Like, people are underrating his reign. It's like, because they're like, oh, well, who are some of these guys? Ali Bagutinov, Chris Carriasso. Like, yeah, some of those names aren't great. That's because he cleared out the division. They needed to find anyone for him to fight. Like, that's what happens. And look at Pantoja. Is the Steve Ercik win like a win we're going to look back at 10 years from now and just be like, oh my God, he beat Steve Ercik? I can't fucking believe it. No, of course not. And look at, do you think Manal Cap? Or wait. Yeah, I mean, only beat him as a contender. Do you think that, let's look at the defenses. Excuse me. Like, look at Kai Kara France. Are we going to look at Kai Kara France and just be like, oh my God, Kai Asakura, oh my God, I can't believe he beat him in 4 title defenses, to dog on Demetrius for clearing out the division, having 11 defenses, and having to fight someone like Tim Elliott, Meanwhile, Pantoja's scraping by Steve Ercik and fighting Kai Kara France in his fucking debut. Like, ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. And he did fight some actually good guys, like elite guys. He beat Benavidez twice. He beat Dotson twice when they were streaking. Like, he beat Benavidez in one of the greatest fights ever. Go watch the first fight between Benavidez. It's amazing. He beat him. Benavidez improves his striking, because that's when Dwayne Ludwig comes to Team Alpha Male and like turns everyone into super strikers. He goes on a streak. He's knocking everyone out, Benavidez that is. And he has this rematch with Mighty Mouse. Everyone's excited. Mighty Mouse knocks him out cold in a round with a punch. Insane. Like, Mighty Mouse, and he had success at bantamweight. He made his way to a title shot against Cruz, lost, whatever. But he beat Miguel Torres. That's like a legit bantamweight win. So he's got 2 divisional success. Greatest flyweight champ of all time, not even close. The most well-rounded fighter of all time, I'd argue. Like, effectively never lost in his prime. He lost to, like, when he was on the come-up and not in his prime against Cruz up a weight class when he's massively undersized. And then you got the dicey Cejudo fight. That's it. So, yeah, Mighty Mouse is being underrated now. To have Pantoja ahead of him is fucking nuts. Jack Slack is, like, entertaining. Some of Slack's takes lately have been kind of fucked, I'm going to be real with you. But moving on. Let's move on. Jon Jones. Number 3. I don't like him. You don't like him. Everyone hates him. He ducked Tom. He ducked Francis. He's a woman-beating piece of shit. Drug cheat. Finger pokes everyone in the eyes. Never gets called for it. Favoritism. Bullshit. Close wins, against Reyes, against Santos, against Gustafsson. Beat middleweights. Actual middleweights like Vitor and Chael, and then guys who should have been middleweights or became middleweights, like Rashad, like Shogun, like Machida. But never really lost. On top for like 12 years, 2 division champion. The Gon win is great, Never the best heavyweight in the world, but still a great win. For Jones, Jones was never the best heavyweight in the world, but that's still a great win. With all the asterisks and with the fact that these are, he beat Cormier, who's on this list, that's a great win. Teixeira is a great win, But since these are weak divisions, and since he's got all the asterisks, he's not number 1 to me. And I don't think that's just bias because he's a piece of shit. I just think, it's hard to rank him higher when you consider all that. And I don't want to talk about this guy anymore, so I'm moving on. Number 2, Alexander Volkanovski. Never lost in his prime, except for up a weight class in a fight that he almost won against Islam Makhachev. But never lost at featherweight in his prime. Beat Holloway 3 times. Beat Aldo when he was arguably still in his prime. And then just ran house on the division. And is one of the greatest talents we've ever seen. No, don't feel like I need to say any more than that. He's number 2. And number 1, you know, probably not surprising, George St. Pierre. People forget, man. You know, people forget how stacked welterweight was back then. You know, John Fitch, 7-fight win streak. Thiago Alves, 7-fight win streak. Beat Hughes, beat Penn, beat Sean Shirk, beat Kara Parisian, beat Mayhem Miller back in the day. Yeah, he's got the 2 kind of gimmies with Matt Serra and Dan Hardy, whatever. But and he was fighting in an era when there were other organizations with their own divisions, but it didn't matter because he beat those champions. Carlos Condit, defending WEC champion. St. Pierre beats him. Nick Diaz, defending Strikeforce welterweight champion. Pierre beats him. Jake Shields, defending Strikeforce middleweight champion, goes down to welterweight in the UFC. Pierre beats him. Johnny Hendricks, close fight, but he won it. I'll defend that decision, you know, but it was very close. You know, you could go either way on it, but I'll defend that decision. And we know Hendricks was roided to the gills, and we know that was like kind of right as Pierre was starting to drop off. He was like 32 when that happened. And he was massively undersized. You know, people have talked about this, but Pierre is a modern day lightweight, and Hendricks was fucking huge. Then he comes back, fights Bisping. Yeah, Bisping was not the best middleweight in the world. We all know it was Whitaker and Romero, and then Adesanya and all that. But Bisping, nevertheless, legit, you know, top whatever ranked middleweight, was the champion technically, and it was a lot fucking bigger than Pierre. And Pierre comes back, has a good fight with him, drops him and subs him. You know, never lost in his prime, avenged his only 2 losses. You know, a resume comparable to Jon Jones, but in way, way better weight classes. The Bisping win's better than the Gane win. You know, he does have losses, but he avenged them. You know, never lost in his prime. He's the GOAT. And that's that. This video is long as shit, so I'm going to wrap up here pretty quick. But I'm just going to go through the list one more time for those of you who stuck with me. Number 20, BJ Penn. 19, Deiveson Figueiredo. 18, Randy Couture. 17, TJ Dillashaw. 16, Daniel Cormier. 15, Frankie Edgar. 14, Dan Henderson. 13, Kamaru Usman. 12, Dominick Cruz. 11, Max Holloway. 10, Fedor Emlienenko. 9, Islam Makhachev. 8, Anderson Silva. 7, Khabib Nermagomedov. 6, Merab Dvalishvili. 5, Jose Aldo. 4, Mighty Mouse. 3, Jon Jones. 2, Alexander Volkanovski. And 1, George St. Pierre. Okay? That's a fucking GOAT list. These other GOAT lists fucking suck. I'm out.